We're gonna go over all things pumpkin pie. This is my guide to pumpkin pie, 4 different ways. For the first dessert, it's gonna be classic pumpkin pie, but it's gonna be my way. And you know my way. I'm not very fancy, I'm not a baker. If you're not a baker, this one's for you. Put it straight up on a sheet tray, serve it family style. It's very rustic, very wholesome, but it's also a little different. We're gonna be adding a little bit of flair here and there. I've got a pecan maple syrup to go on top. Super delicious pie, classic. We're gonna go with that one first. Though pumpkin spice and chai may not share the same cultural similarities, what they're meant for is they're meant to be a warming spice. That's why you see pumpkin spice a lot during the winter time. You might also see chai a lot more during the winter time, although it's a year-round thing. It's more of a warming spice. That's why you have the allspices and the cloves. It's relying heavily on cinnamon. The only difference is probably the black pepper, but I do like to add star anise and cardamom to my pumpkin spice because I just think it's a little nicer. This is gonna make these desserts a lot more comforting. That's why it's fall. It's comforting fall desserts. Why am I mixing this by hand? When we overmix this, we're overworking the gluten. The more we overwork the gluten, the tougher it's going to be. So I'm mixing this by hand just until it comes together, squeezing the butter into the flour. That's why we want to cut our butter into little pea-sized cubes. Now this should be a very scraggy looking dough, like barely put together. And the reason for that is that's what's gonna make this a very nice flaky pie crust. We don't wanna overwork this. That's why I didn't do this in a stand mixer. Although you could do it in a stand mixer, just be very careful. Cut this guy in half, and then I'm going to put them into the shape of what I'm going to eventually roll them out to. If you're gonna do little circular pieces for a pie shape, then do a round disc and put it in your fridge. We're gonna do rectangles because I'm gonna put mine onto a sheet tray. Why put the dough into the fridge? 2 reasons. 1, the gluten needs to relax. If it's not relaxed, it's gonna be too dense. 2, the fat melts. See this? This is a brick now compared to this. The fat can melt into the dough quickly, thus making it a less flaky, denser dough. I don't go too heavy on the flour on my surface because I don't want to add too much extra gluten to this dough and then toughen it up. I use one of these guys. This is a rolling pin, but I like to use the rolling pins that are completely flat, no roundness at all. That just makes my life easier, and it also gives you a little more control. So I'm going to be going for one of these, a sheet tray, not a pie tin. So roughly I roll it out to fit over that sheet tray. When I'm rolling these out, I try to do the same thing I do with flour tortillas. I'll kind of roll it and then turn it. Roll it and then turn it. It's just a muscle memory thing you build up over time. Then your container of choice, we can just kind of put it on top to see where we're at. And once you're probably an inch around the diameter of your container of choice, then that means you're pretty much there. And see my thickness? It's about ½ a centimeter thick. I take my rolling pin, I just get it along the edges here, and then I roll it up. And this is the best way to transfer your dough. We take this onto a sprayed container so it doesn't stick, and then we just gently roll it over. Just work the edges in gently, and then you can just cut off the excess. You take the fork and just give it some pricks all around. Now this is mainly if you're working with a pie like a custard. So I'm just doing what's called staging it with the fork and then back into the fridge. The reason why is back to the gluten development. If we overdevelop the gluten, it's gonna be too stiff and it needs to relax. The fat also needs to chill again completely before I do what's called a blind bake. Now, why blind bake a pie crust? The reason being is I'm working with a custard here. Pumpkin pie, it's a custard. It's basically flan. And this is to prevent the bottom from becoming soggy. So I just need to partially bake it off, and I'm putting beans as a weight, or if you're fancy, you got pie weights, you put it on parchment paper. This is just to make sure that it's weighed down and the dough keeps its shape when we put it in the oven, because it will puff up because it's got that flakiness. This then gets baked off just partially till it begins to hold its shape. Pumpkin pie filling, the basis of everything we're doing in this video today. It's a custard exactly like a flan. The only difference are these 2 things, pumpkin and pumpkin spice. Now, because of the high liquid content from the pumpkin, I'm adding 1 extra egg than I normally would for a flan recipe. And that's just gonna help it to set up a little better. Now, when you're buying pumpkin, I always would say, remember to see that it is 100% pure pumpkin, because there will be times where you have the stuff that already has the sugar and the spices in it. And you want full control. Sweetened condensed milk as well. You want to use this instead of the evaporated milk. This stuff is the stuff that is much thicker, already has the sugar, and it's in the name, it's been condensed. And if you should already have your pumpkin spice made, we add a tablespoon to our mixture here. That is our pumpkin pie filling. Custard gets poured into the pie crust, not all the way at the top. Now, why don't I put pie filling all the way at the top? Well, we have to count for the growth it's gonna get in the oven, so it could overflow. So I just leave a little bit of crust there so it doesn't overflow. This is gonna be prepped later on in the video, but this is a pecan maple syrup that goes right over the top, just a little drizzle. It's gonna give it a nice contrast and caramelization. This is completely optional and necessary though, a little bit of flaky salt to finish. Into an oven that's at about 350 degrees Fahrenheit, 50 minutes or so. While that is cooking, we're gonna go on to the next pumpkin pie dessert. Now the next dessert is something that I love and it's part of my upbringing, and that is flan. Now I don't know if it's considered quite a flan technically, because I'm gonna be bruleeing the top, but it's the same thing, it's a custard. I'm cooking off a pumpkin pie custard in a sous vide water bath. It's gonna be a silky smooth custard that you can keep in the jar in the fridge for whenever you wanna serve it, and you could do one at a time if you want. It's really nice crowd pleaser. It's gonna go with a Teddy Graham milk crunch. The exact same pumpkin pie filling is just going to take 1 can of evaporated milk. That is the only difference that's going on here. Everything else is exactly the same. It gets blended up until smooth. Here are jars. Jars get sprayed off so nothing sticks. I'm just gonna pour each individual jar. Again, not all the way, leaving a little bit of room. Now you might be asking yourself, why am I pouring into jars pumpkin pie filling? Remember I said earlier, pumpkin pie is basically flan. Flan is a custard, and a custard sets at about 176 degrees Fahrenheit. And I'm gonna be doing the exact same method I would do with flan. And I did a video on this in the past. You could check that out with the corn flan, but I'm gonna show you the technique right now. Fingertip tight. So do not tighten it all the way like the Hulk, just fingertip tight. Now this is called sous vide. We're cooking sous vide because flan sets at about 176 degrees Fahrenheit. And this is going to allow me to get exactly that temperature. So putting it in jars and just throwing it into a water bath is a very foolproof technique that I've grown to love, and it's probably now my favorite way to cook a flan. Now, if you don't have this, you could do this in an oven in a water bath. Set your oven to about 325 degrees Fahrenheit, put some boiling water into a tray, toss them in that tray in the water bath. But this is just such a foolproof technique. The flan gets super smooth, super creamy, no bubbles. It's perfect, and it's very foolproof because I'm just tossing it in. Now, this is obviously not exactly like a flan. I didn't put the caramel on the bottom, but it's gonna go on the top, and you will see soon. We're going to make a topping over here. This is the topper. Teddy Grahams. I think graham cracker is one of the best complements to a pumpkin pie. Obviously, there's no crust in that jar. This is going to be our crust, milk powder. The reason for the milk powder is it acts as a binder. It's also going to caramelize, which is going to make that crunchy part. And then butter is the fat that's going to tie everything together. This gets tossed into a 350 degree oven. Now, this originated, I think, from Momofuku Milk Bar, which was called Corn Crunch. This is the same concept, but with graham teddy bears. I think it'll be fun. And it has just like a really nice, like creamy crunchiness to it that's gonna really complement this fall treat. Also, cook it until it's GBD. That's golden brown delicious. Okay, bye. Now, while that is going, let me go ahead and show you really quick how to make a candied pecan with just 2 ingredients. I am only gonna use maple syrup and pecans, and it's such an easy process. We take the pecans, put them into a pot, and then we pour in our maple syrup. To be honest, I didn't even measure this. And then we bring it up to a boil. It takes about 5 minutes until it becomes nice and thick. That then gets strained. Save the syrup because it's delicious and we're gonna use that in this video. Then we put the nuts onto a sheet tray with parchment paper so it doesn't stick. Toss that into an oven that's at about 350 degrees Fahrenheit and we cook it off just until golden brown delicious or a nice candiness. Pull it out, finish it with some flaky salt and let it cool at room temp. And there we go, we've got a candied nut. Coming out of the oven, the pie should have the edges just starting to set. As you can see, we're still a little jiggle in the center. Now, the reason for pulling out with a little jiggle is because we're gonna have carryover cooking and it's already beginning to set. That custard is gonna be perfectly set. We just let it cool at room temp. We do not just immediately toss it into the fridge. No, we need to let it fully come to temp at room. Now, here's a beautiful way to make your crust shine. Melted butter, pecan maple syrup, little mixy mix. Brush lightly on your crust. It gives it a nice glaze, a nice shine, and of course, a beautiful flavor. This is one of my favorite ways to make and serve a pumpkin pie. In a sheet tray, it just feels, I don't know, less fussy, more real, more family style. And also, I just like cutting little square, like sheet tray pizza sizes of a pie. You can actually hold it with your hands like this. There you go. Classic, delicious pumpkin pie with a little flair, a little pecan syrup and a little candied pecan. That's my favorite pie, by the way. It's really good. Okay, we pull it out. Hour later, there we go. That's what we want. Just a little bit of jiggle in the center and the edges are set. Now we can just chill these completely in the fridge until fully set. And here is our finished custard. Now we're going to brulee the custard, make it nice and pretty. Here's how I brulee a custard. A little bit of white sugar, sprinkle generously, torchy torch. You can get these for about $5 at H Mart, Amazon, whatever you want. Whenever I'm bruleeing something with a torch, I make sure to watch it very carefully like a hawk because this stuff is like hot lava. It is not fun when you get it on your skin. But also, as you can see, I'm doing what's called like the rolling technique. I keep my flame in the same place. The only thing that's moving are my fingers moving the jar. You can see the sugar just begins to roll over itself and it sort of creates this like snowball effect where it just caramelizes itself over and over again. So just keep rolling it while keeping that torch going. Obviously, if you don't have a torch, put it in the oven on broil. It works just fine. And there's our brulee action right there. Let it chill for, a few seconds. And it should have a nice, beautiful, crackly crust. That's a delicious pumpkin pie, flan, creme brulee, whatever you want to call it. Another fun way to make a pumpkin pie dessert. For the next one, we're going to be doing pumpkin pie ice cream. It's basically the same base we've been making, but we're making an ice cream base out of it. And it's gonna taste the exact same, sort of like a chai consistency, very warming, but it's nice to have that ice cream that can also go with that Teddy Graham crunch if you'd like. Everything you see here is for pumpkin pie ice cream. All of our whole spices and all of our ice cream stuffs. We've got milk and then we've got cream going into the pot. Carefully measured out pumpkin puree, 100%. I'm adding in the whole spices just because they're gonna steep well in the ice cream, basically like I would be making a chai base. Dry milk powder. The reason for adding milk powder to the milk, it might sound kind of weird to you if you don't know. This has no fat added. So we're adding in more milk solids without adding in extra fat. We add in extra fat, that's gonna add an extra crystallization to our ice cream, and we don't like that. We want a smooth ice cream, not a crystallized ice cream. So we add in more milk solids, it's gonna make it that much more creamier. The reason for bringing the ice cream base up to a simmer is one, hydrating the milk solids. We need to hydrate these milk solids because they're obviously dry. Infusing the flavors, infusing all the spices together with the ice cream base. It's basically like steeping a tea. And then another thing is thickening the ice cream base. We have to do all these things. We can't just toss it into the ice cream machine and it's magic. We have to actually bring it up to a simmer. Then this just goes into a metal container. I like to keep the whole spices in, by the way. I just think it looks nice and it keeps it steeping and more flavorful infusions going on in there. It smells like chai. It's so nice. This just needs to chill in the fridge overnight, and I'm not gonna tell you for the obvious reason of putting hot ice cream base into an ice cream machine. No, not only that. The reason is fat crystallization. It allows the fat crystallization to start happening, which makes a creamy, more stable ice cream. So just let it go for at least 24 hours in the refrigerator. Now our pumpkin pie ice cream can go straight into the ice cream maker. I'm churning it hard. If you don't have an ice cream maker, there are methods to do it otherwise, but today we're just going the ice cream maker route. Ooh, that smells so good. If you have an ice cream maker, I highly recommend you make this. It smells just like a pumpkin pie would. Cover, put in the fridge, double wall container like this, just to keep it from freezing like an ice cube basically, but it should be fine otherwise if you develop that nice fat crystallization. I don't even know what my favorite is anymore, but this one's freaking delicious. Another top favorite of mine, Teddy Graham Milk Crunch pumpkin pie ice cream. Another top pumpkin dessert for me. I'm just having pumpkin pie all kinds of ways today. I'm loving it. Now, next up is going to be one of my childhood favorites, and that is the pumpkin empanada. Now, this is a little bit different than my childhood empanada. I grew up with the more yeasty, bready empanada. This is going to be more hand pie style because we are utilizing the pie dough that we made in the beginning of this video. So that's the beauty of this pie dough and this pie fill, is we can make ourselves a completely different thing, a hand pie or an empanada. You wanna try your best to roll these out as circular as possible. I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect, but just make your little round discs with that exact same pie crust that we made earlier, the flaky, buttery pie crust. And we're just rolling them out in a circular motion. And then we're gonna be going like not too thin. This is about, I don't know, a couple millimeters thick. It's gonna get the filling in a little fold over. As you can see, mine's not perfect. A little sealage, and then we could just seal it over on itself like such. You could crimp this with a fork, crimp this with your fingers. I'm sure you can make it pretty, however you want. And then we have to do some little air vents for the air to escape as well. And that is a pumpkin empanada. Pop these into a 325 Fahrenheit oven, going until just GBD. We don't really have to look at the custard. It's going to set within the pie crust. Now, we don't have to stage it or anything. That's the beauty of a hand pie. Beautiful empanadas. There it is, pumpkin empanadas. The nuts add like a nice texture. This is so good. There it is, pumpkin empanadas, yeah.